Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial on Skoll. I know you guys been liking the In the Cut series of when I do my classes. You know, the class being shot behind the lens, and today we're gonna have a very cool haircut because Alex actually came in with a quite big problem of getting messed up. So I know we talk about this a lot in our shops, in our day-to-day work lives of, you know, clients just coming in, getting messed up by their previous barbers, and then looking for the problem to have a solution in. The problem that we're facing today is the fact that his last barber went way too short in the front over here. So as soon as I peel the hair back, I can see that the length is very, very short up here, right? In this haircut, before I name this haircut, I actually don't know what the choice of length is gonna be until I identify the problem area. In this haircut, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use that problem area as my choice of length for the fringe and for the top. Sometimes you wanna use the problem area in your best interest in order to create the best haircut for your client that's gonna be suitable, right? You don't wanna avoid that area, you actually wanna use that area and choose that as your choice of length for the rest of this look. So for this look, we're gonna go with a shorter fringe in the front. So this fringe is gonna sit a lot shorter, top is gonna sit a lot shorter as well. And we're gonna go ahead and add a lot of texture by doing so. Now that we've identified what we're gonna do on top, I'm gonna go ahead and identify what we're gonna do on the back and on the sides. So because he has some cool texture in the back, I don't wanna just go ahead and skin fade all of this out, right? Because I want to give a look that's a little bit more creative and stylish, I'm probably gonna leave some length in the back, but with leaving the length in the back, it's not necessarily gonna be a mullet, right? Because the length that he came in with isn't really ready to be a mullet length. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give him a slight burst taper on the sides so I can just clean up the sides and give him some more shape from the front. But in the back, I'm just gonna go ahead and leave his external lengths, add some texture to the internal areas, and go ahead and give him something a little bit more textured, a little bit more messy, almost like a mini mullet effect, but it's not gonna be quite the mullet look yet just because he doesn't have the length. This is gonna be a look where he can maybe grow into something like that. And yeah, overall, I think the haircut is gonna be using this problem area in the front to our best advantage and creating a really cool haircut around that. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our breakdown of his head shape and his face shape. First thing I feel is the head shape from the front. Why is this so important? Because the roundness is probably gonna be the most drastic from the front. So I tilt his head slightly back, right? And I try to have his head sitting at a nice 90-degree angle from the chin. So right here, bring it up, and I go from the front, and I just see if this is how he's gonna look at it in the mirror. Now, the first thing I need to feel is the apex. So the apex is obviously the very top. Bring a string down, and I'm just gonna feel the corner of his head. This is called the parietal ridge, and this is gonna be the emphasis that most people like to put a square shape on, triangular shape on, whatever it is. This is the area where we need to build some weight in. Because what happens if the parietal ridge is very flat and we build a flat surface? No volume, no texture, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna build weight through these two corners. It doesn't just end there. We can't just think, okay, because his parietal ridge is flat, we need to build weight. No, what shape are we building? How much weight are we building? Because everyone's gonna have a different dip at the parietal ridge. From here, what I see is that he has a pretty flat parietal ridge. The biggest dip actually happens right in the beginning. So it needs to be a little bit more of a wider buildup of weight. If he had a slimmer corner, I'd probably keep the shape a little bit slimmer. So you start the buildup of weight, and this is where we're gonna probably section off in the beginning. Second thing I feel is the head shape from the back. So why is the head shape from the back such a crucial part? It's because this is gonna determine how much bulk we're actually gonna be able to keep from the angles that most likely we capture. A lot of our haircuts are captured in this direction. So the emphasis is actually built here, here, and here. The first thing I need to feel is the crown, very flat crown. So some weight needs to be built. And the reason his crown is very flat is because I don't feel too much of a big difference going into the nape. So now I've identified two of the biggest problems, which is corners, slightly wide, but dips from the beginning. So we need to build a pretty wide shape from this front. And in the back, we need to build a good amount of weight up because he has very little to no shape in the crown. I think the coolest part about this haircut is gonna be working with this problematic area. Now, what do we know about Asian hair? It's not easy to cut, and it's not easy to make look really popping with styling, right? Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead and wet this down. I'm gonna fully saturate the haircut. This haircut, necessarily, I wouldn't call the most creative look, but we're gonna turn it into a creative look because the choice of length in the front is quite short. I'm gonna have to put a little bit of a creative twist into it to bring some style points, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is just saturate his hair fully until it's nice and wet. And now with Asian hair, I don't want to soak it too much. Reason being, when the hair likes to react, right? Like Asian hair, it bounces, right? You don't want it to be fully soaked because now you're cheating on yourself. You want to be as honest as how the hair naturally likes to lay. So I'm going to leave the hair probably like 70% wet. So just feel that out. That's kind of where I want it to be. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split the hair in half. I'm gonna identify that disconnection. So from here, I'm looking for his nose, okay? Middle of his nose, and I'm just gonna draw a section straight down. I'm gonna push everything over onto the other side. The reason why I wanna find a midpoint is because I still want some structure to this haircut. Now the second thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and isolate just the fringe. I'm gonna push it down. Now there's one thing I'm reading for as I do this. When I'm pushing the hair down, I'm actually looking for density. Do I like the amount of weight sitting in the front? Yes or no, right? So that's like my biggest question that I'm asking myself. Do I like the length? Or do I feel like it's not enough? I actually like the weight in the front, so we can then move on. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and grab a feather razor, and I'm just gonna go ahead and identify that short piece. That's the piece right there, right? You guys see that? Yeah. So I'm gonna grab my feather razor. Okay, I'm gonna pull, and I'm gonna identify that short piece. And what do I notice about the short piece when I pull it vertically? The layer is sitting slightly square right here, right? So what I need to do when I match this fringe in isn't to one length this in, it's actually to use a slight bit of elevation and just match that length in. So pull using my feather razor. Okay, using slight elevation to match that length. I wanna stay as close to the choice of length that we are in. Same thing on this side. Okay, I wanna pull using a slight bit of elevation to match the natural layers up top. And I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a soft guide. Now I'm just gonna take a look at from the front one more time. Okay, I notice there's a little bit more weight sitting through the middle. So I'm gonna turn his head. I'm just gonna remove a little bit more. Okay, I'm moving visually now. Just trying to have the front sit as cohesive as possible. And I'm not gonna move too much into it because I can also touch it up dry. Biggest problem in the front, which was right here, has already been fixed off my first move, which is matching the length in the front. So now we can move on to our second step. Now, my next move is gonna be starting in the back. The second biggest problem that I noticed about his hair is that he had a very jumpy hairline towards the cowlick. If this length is cut improperly, it's just gonna go everywhere, especially because I also know that he has Asian hair. We're starting from the biggest problem, moving down to our smaller problems, and then we're just gonna polish the haircut together. So second problem is gonna be in the crown. And I'm just gonna go ahead and create a radial section based on how it naturally wants to lay. Now you might be asking, how do I know if it naturally wants to lay this way, right? How do I know that? You have a cowlick to work with. So you're working with the cowlick pattern and you're seeing how that hair reacts. If it doesn't lay naturally and likes to just spring up or jump up, maybe use it a little bit lower, maybe go a little bit higher. So that's kind of how you can tell off that guide. So that's the second guide you're gonna take. I'm just gonna go ahead and isolate just the back off. Once I've identified the back, I'm gonna move back into the top. I'm just gonna layer top. So I'm just gonna have him put this head down. We're gonna create a vertical guide going straight down. Okay, vertical guide going straight down because I want to go ahead and layer this. We're gonna spin the chair. Now, our choice of length is already set in the front, right? We know this. Now, when I pull up, this is the biggest mistake people tend to make is they think that this connection starts here. Let's start cutting right here. Why this is improper is because why did you do all this one length just to cut it before it? So that this connection actually starts right here. Reason why is because number one, this was clearly cut with the razor. That's why this disconnection exists. Now, when you pull this up and you thinking naturally, this is where you're gonna start the layer is a very natural thought process because that's where the corner begins to building up, right? You wanna start cutting it at the end of that build up. So it's not at the beginning of the build up, but it's at the end, which is here. From that build up, pull. I'm gonna point cut into a square line. The reason why I wanna go square is because I don't wanna build up too much weight up here either. I want a lot of texture. I want a lot of movement. So second guide through. And I'm just gonna go ahead and create my second guide through. Now this guide, 2 is gonna go into 1 because I want a square line horizontally as well. Because why? Build up weight through what? The roundness of the head. So this is the corner that we need to create. So this section is gonna get over directed back into previous. See that over direction? Okay, I'm gonna draw another guide here. Third guide through on top. And I'm gonna do the same thing, over direct back to previous. So I'm gonna over direct this just back to previous as well. And whatever is left on this side, because we don't have a section yet, I'm just gonna push everything over, and whatever hasn't been cut, I'm just gonna touch up, okay? Okay, so same thing on this other side. We're losing a little bit of saturation, so I'm just gonna go ahead and saturate his hair one more time. Create my section, push everything over. Now, if you guys wanna move a little bit more precisely, I recommend always moving 2 sections at a time. Once you understand the over direction very well, you don't need to. In this case, we are. Okay, so 2 sections at a time. Draw this up. Okay, comes back to previous. If we were pushing, now we're pulling. Why? Because it's on the opposite side, right? Moving precisely with the texture. 2 more sections to move. Boom. Okay. Once you gain a little from this side, probably gonna lose a little bit from this side. Moving 2 sections at a time. We're gonna pull instead of pushing. And you guys see this disconnection on this side? It's longer on this side. Probably had a comb over before. Now everything on this side that hasn't been cut, just bring it all over. Everything. And now, what do we have, guys? We have texture, we have movement, and our biggest problem area has created a whole different haircut for us. Okay, let's move on to the back now. What do we just notice? Like right when I cut the top, I noticed something about the back. So one thing I noticed is that it actually looks good. So the back hasn't even been touched yet, and it already looks uniform with the top. So I don't feel like me cutting the back right now is gonna enhance it in any way. If anything, by me cutting this length anywhere shorter, it's just gonna ruin the look that I'm going for. So this is when disconnection comes in. Obviously, we've built up 2 different lengths. We pull it, there's a minor disconnection going through from the top and the back, right? One thing that I know about this disconnection is that it's actually helping my hair cut out. So one thing I don't need to do is touch more and get rid of more length or more weight by using graduation or layering. This type of silhouette is better to cut when it's completely dry, visually. So we attacked this top part technically. We're gonna attack this entire back area visually. But I do notice one thing is this length right here, and it's bothering me, so I'm just gonna get that out of the way. What do we notice about the front? The shape of the sides. There's too much bulk, right? So let's fix that. Okay, so what's the next biggest problem in this haircut? Biggest problem about this haircut, next step is gonna be the sides. So if there's no problem in a haircut, you look at something and you gotta be honest with yourself. And genuinely, you don't see a problem with it, don't touch it. Touch it up when it's dry. Because when it's wet, you sacrifice too much length and too much texture. So the next part that we're gonna work on is gonna be the sides. And I want you guys to understand something as I section this out. Reading the roundness of the head is gonna be so crucial to this part. I know you guys do a lot of fades, and transitioning into fades, you always gotta read where that debulk line is gonna sit, right? But I think past that now. It's like, I'm not thinking about where the debulk line is gonna sit anymore. That's actually the last thing I'm looking at. I'm looking at where is the weight line gonna sit best on his cheekbones, his jawline. So where is his buildup of weight gonna look best at, depending on his facial structure, instead of thinking about where is my 3-guard gonna sit. So change this perspective from this angle to more of this angle. And I guarantee you, your haircuts will look way better and your clients will come back way more satisfied. So the first thing that I'm looking at is where the weight line is gonna sit from the front. So let's just take a look at his cheekbones real quick. You notice his cheekbones tend to protrude right towards the outer area right here. So we need to keep his weight line slightly more wide. Second thing I noticed, he has a slimmer jawline. So because he has a slimmer jawline and his cheekbones tend to protrude out more, building a super tight square shape here is not gonna complement his head shape or his face shape. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build up a buildup of weight depending on where that cheekbone lands. So the buildup of weight is gonna start here. That's where the buildup of weight is gonna begin. Because if I brought this in tight, imagine he lost all this. Doesn't suit his face, right? Doesn't look good with his face shape. But if I brought the weight in right here, how does that look? Way better, right? Okay, so that's gonna be our guide for creating a weight line for the front. First thing I'm gonna read is the round of the head. Comb's gonna go on top, and I'm gonna bend it into that weight. Boom. Second thing I read is corner of the hairline. That's the 2 things I'm gonna read when I create this section. Identify the corner of the hairline. At the beginning of the round, not the end, I'm gonna go from the back. From that back, I'm just gonna draw a line all the way to the corner. And from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push everything forward, and I'm gonna see how much hair he actually has in the front. From the back here, transitional point is here, right? Yeah. So all of this is disconnected from here. So I know this hasn't been touched at all, but I know some of this has been touched. So I know some of this has been touched, this hasn't been touched. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna draw a diagonal guide straight from the back all the way to the front. Bring this down. And now from here, I'm gonna stay fingers tight to the head. And I'm gonna go ahead and create my incision. And I'm gonna travel that incision all the way back. Second guide through, all the way. And it's very simple. I'm gonna over direct this back to previous. Okay, so boom, comb goes under, tension pulls in, and I'm just gonna create my second incision. Over direct it back to previous. Now, what do you notice as I get to the back here? There's less hair to cut, right? Because this area has already been layered. So I'm only building up weight just like in this corner really. Last guide through. Nothing left to cut, okay? And the sides are finished just like that. Same thing on this other side. Okay, push everything forward and draw a section. Second guide through.
Did you go tight to the scalp on that first one?
Yeah, very tight, as tight as possible. Okay, and the weight line is finished. Now we can start having some fun with the shape. For my haircuts now, I kind of attack it 50% visual, 50% technical. So like my technical cutting portion is finished here. This obviously is not my final product, right? This is where I can start really going in and transitioning this look into something that I was imagining more in the beginning. Because I want a good amount of texture in there, I'm gonna pre-style this look with some texture paste. Okay, so texture paste is gonna go in. And where I'm really planning on hitting is the areas that I cut. You don't need to style all this. We're gonna cut it anyways. Okay, it's just the areas that I've cut. Just light. You don't need to add too much just yet either. Blow dryer is gonna go on, and we're gonna go on to just roughly drying this look up. And you see the cowlick line right here? Place your finger there. So all I'm gonna do now is place my finger right at the cowlick. I'm gonna go clockwise. Okay, so right now, already, you guys can notice something. His hair has way more texture now, right? And way more movement. Now we just have to make this haircut more polished, something that's a little bit more suitable. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna grab my dry cutting texture scissor, is I'm just gonna go ahead and soften up this weight line just a little bit more. Okay. Okay, just softening everything up. Now moving into that nape, I noticed there's a little bit too much weight right there, right? But because this length is very short right now, because the length is very short, if I were to go in with my feather razor and remove weight like this, there's a big chance I'm gonna create a hole because there's so much weight and length. I mean, there's not enough weight and length to actually hide all that. So I'm gonna go in with my scissor, texture scissor, and I'm just gonna slice into it. And I'm just removing some of that weight. And the reason I'm being quite aggressive and taking out a good amount is because none of this hasn't been touched yet. So I still have that room to take out weight. I just don't want to take out any length yet. Now, next thing I want to do as I get into this look, the same thing, I soften up this side as well. The next thing I'm gonna do is soften up the top and add texture. I'm gonna pull this horizontally. If you notice, I'm not attacking it from a corner like that. Yeah, I'm attacking it vertically because this is gonna soften hair. This is gonna texture hair. It's a big difference. I'm not texturizing anything right now. I'm just softening the weight. Moving horizontally. Now from here, I don't wanna soften out the fringe too much yet because the fringe is a very visual area. Move towards the middle. Pick it up. I'm just gonna keep taking out all that weight. And as I transition into taking out that weight, let's just say you have a tricky area to work with, and sometimes not everyone's hair is straight, right? You notice there's some wavy hair, curly hair. Now, how would I soften that? Is I would probably go from the opposite direction and push in. This way, I don't have to sacrifice that texture in the front. Asian hair, anyone that has like straighter texture, you can just go from the opposite direction. It's a little bit easier, right? And before moving on, I'm just gonna go ahead and add in the sides. So I have an option here too of how I'm gonna design this taper. I'll try to leave as much of the sideburns as I can just to have a little bit more of a creative finish for this haircut. So I'll try to knock out the weight line, but I'll try to leave the bottom a little bit more wispy. So 3-guard open, and I'm just gonna go straight into that weight line, avoiding this area right here. Okay. Because I'm planning on leaving that area, I'm just gonna down fade. So 1 guard, 1.5 open is gonna go in. I'm just gonna hit right under that, but I'm gonna scoop out. Okay, close it. Sit right underneath that. 2 guard, gonna go in, slightly open that up. And the next guard is gonna be 1 guard. I'm just gonna open that up. I'm just gonna corner that in. Now I have to be a little bit more careful now because I wanna maintain all this length, right? Close it up. And I think where we can really make the magic happen here is with our trimmer. So I'm just gonna start outlining this. Same thing here, I'm just gonna go ahead and create my C-cup still. And we have something a little bit more creative, that way I can have a little bit more control of the creativity after. Okay, so we're probably gonna move on to the other side and just go into it how you normally would, okay? 2 guard goes in, open that up. Close that up. And I'm literally just down fading 1 guard at a time now, fading very visually at this point. 1.5, open. Just using my corners now. Being a little bit more mindful of what I'm taking off. Okay, and then close that up. Open that up. Okay, controlling that weight line. Making sure I'm not digging into any of this either. My 1 guard open. Just touching it, okay? I'm not even trying to get rid of too much. I'm just touching it, okay? Create a nice strong C-cup. And that's really gonna bring that flare out. Now, what about the nape? I feel like the nape is an area that hasn't been figured out yet, right? So we know that we've removed internal weight throughout it, but how are we gonna finish this off? So right when I push it down, I notice there's a little bit of weight sitting right here. So all I'm just gonna do is refine that just a bit. I'm being a little bit more careful with it now though. And then towards the bottom here, I'm just gonna you notice how from the sides, it looks way cleaner now, right? Some of this weight can just go. Okay, and now it's kind of giving more of that mullety effect. Okay, the next thing I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and remove a little bit more weight in the fringe. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have him tilt his head down, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and just slice into the fringe. Just removing a little bit of weight. And as I move, I'm just gonna feel his hair, and in heavier areas, I'm also just gonna slice into it. Okay, I wanna emphasize texture, and I wanna remove some of that weight because there's too much volume sitting everywhere. And I'm trying to refine everything as much as I can before I'm gonna go ahead and style this up. And I think for a look like this, the biggest change it's gonna have is when you're actually styling it. Because right now, until I actually choose to use the product and style it, the finished product is gonna be really hard to look at. So I want you to understand when I'm attacking this portion of the haircut is where can I control weight now? Where can I control weight and where can I control movement? And I'm really just feeling it out. I don't really need to see anything anymore. I just wanted this to feel very soft. A lot of movement, a lot of texture. Like I said, when we get into styling of this haircut, the biggest emphasis that I can choose to use is how I'm gonna style it and what products I'm gonna use. So I wanna have something very creative and very loud with the styling, but I also wanna keep his haircut a little bit more formatted so that it's very matte and dry, but I want some shine into it. So what products do you think would do all of that for me? Give it a lot of structure, give it a lot of movement, but also keep it slightly shiny. So I like texture powder actually, because texture powder is gonna give it that volume that I need, but I also like gel pomade. and also like hairspray. So we're gonna combine those three. Reason being, I don't wanna use matte pomade because matte pomade is gonna have too much hold and not enough movement. And I need to create the movement before I create the hold. So we're gonna start with texture powder. So the first product is gonna be from Mason's Pomade, and I'm gonna use some texture powder, and I'm gonna give it a generous amount all throughout the hair. And I'm just gonna give this, so emphasize the texture with powder first. Now the next thing I wanna use is, because what do you notice right when I put the top powder in? It looks very dry, no? So the hair looks like there's not enough moisture to it. It looks like I almost dried the hair out. So this is when I choose to use a little bit of more of a wet product. You know, you could use like Suavecito gel. Like, you know, people talk down on gel because they think it's like an old school product. I actually love using gel because gel is gonna add the correct amount of shine, but also the correct amount of hold that we need for a lot of men's haircuts. So a little bit of gel is gonna go a long way. The reason why I'm gonna go with gel is because I also want a slight wet look. Now, what I'm gonna do with this gel is that I'm gonna actually dilute it with a little bit of water. So before I spread it out, I'm gonna grab that gel in my hand, and I'm gonna dilute it with a spray of water. Okay, and it's gonna add a little bit more shine to it. I'm not adding it into the roots, but I'm adding it to the ends. And now that I've, added both products in, I still want to use a little bit of hairspray to finish off this look. And you see how the shape, because the weight line is structured right to his, cheekbones, it's fitting the shape of his face very well. And you guys notice how the back hasn't been layered or graduated, but it's just sitting perfectly. And it's sitting perfectly, and it's sitting like just the right amount of hair. All right, so obviously for this haircut, it was a creative crop on top with, more of an emphasis in the back, with leaving the back nice and long to really have that mullet transition. But I think, adding that slight accent piece on the side, using the front of, which was the biggest problem area that we started with, as our focal point, creating something short around it, textured around it, was kind of the main focus of this haircut. I think the biggest takeaway is that, how can we create such a challenging scenario into a dope look and transition it into something that's very rockable and also something very stylish. So yeah, this is gonna be the final look of today's demo. You guys are gonna be able to see the full 360 after.